Hey, welcome to Post Games, a podcast about why and how we love video games. My name is Chris Plant, and this week I would like to tell you about why you can't escape porn games.
Surprise!
That's right. If it wasn't clear enough by that title, today's episode is extremely not safe for work, rated M for mature. If you have children in the car, I really do encourage you to switch to something a bit more wholesome. The episode's not, terrible or offensive or any of that stuff. It's just not for kids. So no worries. I will cue the music and give you just a second to figure things out. Cool. Just us grown-ups. So, what is up with all the porn games? I'm not the only one seeing this, right? Sex games, lewd games, adult, erotic, mature games. In April of this year, 121 games tagged Not Safe for Work debuted on Steam, and they have just perfect titles like Coffee and Boobs, Latex and Tentacles, I Rizzed Up a Femboy, and please, we have to make space for Monster Ops 5 and Monster Ops 6. Picture Call of Duty, reimagine it as a visual novel, and the beefcakes like Lieutenant Beefcake, they're running infiltration missions on some hot monster ass. On the surface, the market doesn't look so different from all other categories on Steam. Most games have little to no engagement, but a few titles, like Butt Night, have hundreds of glowing reviews. Here's one. If you like butt and shoot them up, you found a diamond. The game is well done, the art is beautiful, the story is funny, the gameplay is fine-tuned, and the butts are gorgeous. Now, most people I know like butt and shoot them up. Hell, most people I know love butt and shoot them up. And yet, most people I know don't play lewd games. Or do they? And they don't tell me. Are we all keeping a secret? This week, I get to the bottom of things. Where did all the sex games come from? Who plays them? And should you try them? Act 1, how sex games went from the back rooms to the front page. Act 2, and I think you're really going to enjoy this, an interview with Hot Pink, a really thoughtful, generous, and open lewd video game developer. Has made some truly astonishingly beautiful H games. In Act 3, the news of the week, which, I'm going to be real with you, doesn't have a lot of naked stuff in it, and if you, for whatever reason, like me, grew up in the Midwest and are uncomfortable with basically all things sex, I suppose you could skip to that, but I don't think you're going to want to, because if you listen to the interview, you will learn about the hottest trend in hot, sexy games. And I'm going to tell you right now, you will not guess what it is. In a very special bonus act for Patreon subscribers, the alternate history of sex, porn, erotic games in Japan. Yes, while things got censored in America, it went very differently in Japan. Eroge and other forms blossomed and bloomed into a phenomenon. And it really is the missing link between the censorship of the 1990s and early 2000s in America and the everything goes approach of today. It is a new year and you want to eat better, but you still have no time to work with. You have no energy. You have so much going on in your life. Oh, what do? You do Factor. 2 minutes, real food, and you are done. you're not failing at eating healthy. You're failing at having 3 extra hours in every night. You're failing at not being a chef and wanting to do cleanup. Factor takes care of that. It has delicious food that is good for you. You got lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and none of the yucky stuff, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners. It will offer you whatever you need to match your lifestyle. For me, Mediterranean diet, it really works well. But maybe you need something else, like a high-protein diet or GLP-1 support or ready-to-eat salads. Whatever it is, Factor wants to meet you on your page. Always fresh, never frozen, and like I said, ready in 2 minutes with no prep, no cleanup, just chill. I use Factor. I think that you should too. Head to factormeals.com/postgames, 50 off, and use code postgames50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscriptions purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. Okay, let's get started. To take us into the show and to give you a taste of the quality happening at the highest levels of adult video games, here's a song from Flipwitch, Forbidden Sex. Act 1. How adult games went from the back rooms to the front page. Nearly as long as video games have been available to play in the comfort of your own home, so too have pornographic video games. Though to be clear, the porn games of the 1980s didn't look anything like the lewd games of today. A naked man was a vertical line with a horizontal dash for a penis. A naked woman was a line with a slightly higher dash for breasts. Apparently, for the adults of the early 80s, this was enough. Imagination is a powerful thing. It all begins in this period of pre-regulation. Soft Porn Adventure, released in 1981 as a text-based game by programmer Charles Benton. It was a learning exercise, but his friends encouraged him to turn it into an official release for the Apple II. Make some bucks. You play as a bumbling playboy trying to pick up women, but the sexiest thing about this game is its box art. 3 topless women lounge in a hot tub as a waiter serves them drinks. The cast is unbelievable. From left, we have Diane Siegel, production manager of Online, which would become the early video game publishing giant Sierra Online. We have Susan Davies, the company's bookkeeper, and we have Roberta Williams, who co-founded Sierra Online with her husband, Ken. Roberta Williams is a video game Hall of Famer, an icon, a superstar. The hot tub in the box art photo belongs to her and Ken. Now, soft is the key piece of Soft Porn Adventure. It's a relatively tame adventure, more interested in inspiring laughs than climaxes. But the porn in the title attracted plenty of attention. The game sold around 50,000 copies, a considerable portion of the Apple II's install base. Soft Porn Adventure was, unintentionally, a cheap and quick-to-make hit. Naturally, imitators appeared overnight, and the race was on to get porn games into the market. The biggest fish in this porn pond was Mystique, a company specializing in adult video games for the Atari 2600 console. The stuff is junk, Not because it's pornography, to be clear, but because it's a shameless cash grab. The formula was simple and crass. Target men with horny, Porky's-inspired box art, render poorly drawn pixels bumping up against each other. These games were lazy parodies, and I'm really stretching the word parody here, of old, proven game design, recreating everything from the iconic, like Pong, to the forgettable, like Kaboom. The best-known Mystique game is the notorious Custer's Revenge. The player, and I won't spend too much time on this, controls a collection of lines that we are told represents Colonel Custer. The goal is to rape indigenous women. People protested the game at the time, attracting coverage from newspapers and even Entertainment Tonight, and it sold 80,000 copies. I know, it's fucking depressing. We live in a depressing world. Now, you might be wondering, how did this shit get sold on a machine as popular as Atari in a time when video game consoles were largely seen as toys? And that's a great question. The early 1980s were the Wild West for video games. The government was a good decade away from seriously considering regulations, and console manufacturers had yet to establish standards for what was allowed to appear on their machines and what wasn't. The Atari hardware was simply a tool that would run whatever people made for it, allowing Atari to benefit from sales while denying responsibility. But Custer's Revenge and other titles, I'll let you incognito Google the gimmick of beat 'em and eat 'em, were raising concerns amongst parents, retailers, and video game publishers. The parents were obviously concerned about their kids and some sense of morality. But the retailers and the video game publishers, they feared that all of this sludge content would impact the reputation of the medium as a whole. It was bad for the long-term health of porn and lewd video games, too. There's an ocean between the horrific, shameless, and misogynistic catalog from Mystique and the cheeky, text-filled, soft-core adventure that had been produced only a few years prior. In the absence of national policy, local U.S. counties began to ban the sale of specific games, including, of course, Custer's Revenge. Meanwhile, Atari's reputation is becoming mud as these cash grab porn games filled stores along with tons and tons of other unvetted non-pornographic slop, largely funded by venture capital rushing into the market for the same reason, a quick and supposedly easy buck. It became a full-time job for the consumer to tell the difference between the few good Atari games and the many that would fill garbage dumps for years to come. Suddenly, supply far outweighs demand, and we get the video game crash of 1983. In the mid-'80s, as the video game industry rebuilt itself and regained the trust of its audience, porn and lewd games got locked out. It wasn't one industry-wide decision, but a confluence of internal and external censorship. Some of these things were meant to protect the games industry. Some were meant to crush it. And some, weirdly, a bit of both. In the late 1980s, Nintendo, you know them, you largely love them, licensed the seal of approval to official NES games. It was a way of guaranteeing to customers burned by Atari and the like that any NES game met a basic threshold of quality. Like, it ran, you could finish it, it wasn't total absolute garbage. It was also an editorial standard. In Japan, Nintendo refused to provide the seal of approval on games featuring explicit nudity and sexuality. Nintendo of America, they go even further, removing non-sexual nudity and adding more clothes to various games. Creation of not safe for work interactive media becomes more or less commercially unsustainable. But not all art needs to be commercial. Some art can exist just for the sake of existing, except when the government says it can't. At this time, unlike film and TV, video games were an unprotected art form, meaning the government could enforce regulations should they ever notice that video games even exist. By the early 1990s, the U.S. government becomes aware of the medium at long last. This was back when the U.S. government, for better or worse, considered oversight and regulations as a thing that they would do, unlike now, where crypto and AI and social media can just run roughshod all over society, and I digress. In 1993, video game developers sit before Senate hearings. They're led by then-Democrat Joe Lieberman and Herbert Kohl. The senators largely focused on violence, but thanks to Night Trap, picture the tamest direct-to-video slasher film literally imaginable. The question of sex was raised.
We're in this huge house with all your friends. We have telephones, we have a car, your parents are gone, and you say, so?
Come on, Sarah, what's the first thing you think of?
Party!
Society that we resist the impulse to do what I think, let me say for myself, I'd like to do. I'd like to be able to pass a law saying you can't produce this stuff anymore. We don't do that because we value our freedoms. But with those rights that the producers of video games, in this case, have also come responsibilities. And that's been the partner to rights in our society. And I think what we're all saying is that we don't feel that this particular industry has carried out those responsibilities in the way that they should, and now's the time to change.
And so, with the evening news warning parents nationwide about the dangers of video game sex and violence, a full moral panic ensues. To avoid formal government oversight, the industry opts to self-police, forming the ESRB. The self-regulatory organization operates like the MPAA for films, telling people, presumably parents, an age range for any given product. E for everyone, T for teen. Like the MPAA, the ESRB is remarkably chill about extreme violence and utterly terrified of sex. Mortal Kombat allowed players to pull out a man's beating heart and take a bite of the organ. The ESRB gave it an M rating, meaning the game was intended for adults, but could be sold at any store, including Toys R Us, which is where I got my copy as a little kid by tricking my grandparents. But sex drew a rating above M, the dreaded AO, or adults only. AO games, like X-rated films, were prohibited from traditional marketing and banned from sales at most major retailers. Forget porn games. Just making a game with explicit sex risked total demonetization. In the 90s, video game sex becomes let's call it a flirtation, a naughty little spice. We have Duke Nukem.
I'm Duke Nukem.
Rumble Roses.
Holy cow.
The Dead or Alive series.
Holy shit.
Where women are scantily clad objects to be looked at.
This sucks.
Or sex existed as a suggested reward for romance in games like Mass Effect. Sex is inferred. The lights dim. And then, perhaps most egregiously, and outside of the bounds of the ESRB, sex becomes a tool for marketing. This is the era of booth babes, when traditionally attractive women were paid to dress in scantily clad outfits and stand next to random video games at trade shows, if they even needed the trade show. Early in my career, I was invited to preview events at strip clubs. I've attended an event at a literal strip club, Duke Nukem, and at a conference room converted into a strip club, for the game True Crime, which would become Sleeping Dogs. Sex seemed to be everywhere in games except in the actual games. How much sex could be tossed on a dish before it triggered the ire of the ESRB was a mystery. Mortal Kombat games drew an M with women wearing latex, cutting men in half. By comparison, Thrill Kill featured similar levels of violence while explicitly starring a dominatrix. There's a reason you probably have heard of Mortal Kombat and not Thrill Kill. The latter was never released after being threatened by an AO rating. The closest American audiences got to a mainstream sex game was Leisure Suit Larry, a tame, and this is true, cartoon remake of soft porn adventure. Yes, the game from way back when, the people in the bathtub. That is the original source material for Leisure Suit Larry. Meanwhile, actual nudity in mainstream Western games is left to hardcore fans willing to mod the code to turn a tank top into no top. Full-on porn games existed on the periphery. Shareware demo discs distributed at computer shows, crude web games. So, unable to draw a considerable profit, they had to be passion projects, cheaply made and often clones of old games. Sadly, not so different from the early days. If you've ever visited a truck stop on a long road trip and found a pack of cards with naked ladies on the back, US porn games were not so different. But, on the other side of the world, porn games turned into something else. Something mostly better, and something unquestionably bigger. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to divide up a little bit. Patreon subscribers, I have a bonus section for you this week, and it is a detailed history of what happened in Japan. How porn games became eroge games, became a cultural phenomenon that really set the stage for Western, not safe for work, lewd games. For it being a culture, for it being largely accepted. But don't worry, if you're not a Patreon subscriber, that's okay. The rest of the story is still here to be told, because we will be skipping ahead to how lewd games, porn games, sexy games, not safe for work games became normal, became common, became relevant after decades of more or less prohibition. So, in either case, I'll see you right after the break. While erotic games stalled in the US, cybersex, my friends, it flourished. Subscribe to Postgames on Patreon for a short reading from the 1993 Brady Strategy Guide, The Joy of Cybersex. Yes, that's right. The same company that made the strategy guides for Dragon Quest, Grand Theft Auto, and Guitar Hero once taught people about the power of teledildonics. I can't wait to share it with you. And now, sexy games in the age of modern online distribution. So, how does the Western game market go from all-encompassing prohibition on sex games to today when, and I'm checking Steam as I'm recording this, someone releases My Bimbo Dream Season 1. I guess we have to wait for what happens in Season 2. To start, it really shouldn't be surprising that porn is ubiquitous in video games. It should be a surprise that the dams of self-censorship held the flood off for so long. Historically, it's pornography that serves as a rocket fuel for young technologies. VHS tapes famously bested the Betamax format when pornographers chose the former as their preferred standard. Couples bought Polaroids and camcorders to create private, consensual materials. The DVD player attracted early adopters with its ability to quickly and easily skip between scenes. The internet, VR, the list goes on and on. But in all of those cases, the hardware, or the platform, was fighting for competition, and porn was a means of building support amongst early adopters who would pay the initial high prices to get their kicks in increasingly higher definition video formats or simpler and more private means of distribution. But video game consoles, they evolved differently. Video games creators had to appease multiple forms of governance just to get to the customer. They had to deal with the ESRB to avoid an AO rating. They had the console maker for certification and licensing. They had the game retailer to be stocked, the credit card companies for sales transactions. And before all of that, they needed the bank or the investor who more than likely saw video games as a thing for children, not a thing for sexy games. To get a foothold, the creators needed a solution for each of those problems. And the internet, well, it provided them. Slowly, and then all at once. In the 2010s, digital storefronts became a trusted and common way to sell and buy games, particularly on PC. A digital storefront on PC immediately knocked down many of the beams holding up sexy, lewd video game prohibition or self-censorship, whatever you want to call it. Games released digitally on PC wouldn't need to be sold in stores, meaning no need for the approval of a store, and thus no need for support from a physical distributor, meaning no need for a publisher. And being on PC, the game didn't need certification or licensing to run on the hardware, nor an ESRB rating. But the lewd game makers still had big issues when it came to making money and marketing their wares. You can hear a lot more about the rise of digital distribution in Post Games Episode 1, but in short, you should know that amongst all the players, Steam was and is king. Steam is a privately owned digital storefront that sells games for Windows, Mac, and Linux. If a game wants to make money on PC, it really needs to be on Steam. For its first decade of existence, this is the early 2000s, Steam had strict policies prohibiting pornographic games. But in time, the policies relaxed. Coincidentally, as the financial potential of the space became more and more obvious. In the 2010s, credit cards still limited the ability for devs to make money, but new artist funding tools like Patreon provided just enough financial footing to get some pioneers to lay a foundation. In this same era, cottage industry, for the first time in decades, begins to form in the Western market, thanks to digital retailers like Faku and media outlets like Lewd Gamer. And suddenly, things kind of come together. There is a mountain of unreleased adult content from Japan. There's now a store to sell it. There is a media outlet to discuss it, and in some capacity to bring awareness that it even exists. And there is an established fan space that has already been localizing this material. Suddenly, there is a bridge between the adult video games market in Japan and the audience in the West. And from there, expansion. Platforms like itch.io showed a traditional storefront could also host not safe for work content too, as these upstarts did the hard work of reintroducing lewd games to the West. Steam policy adapted. At first, players could buy a non-pornographic version of a game on Steam and then download a patch outside Steam to modify the game, adding the lewd content in. Most famous of all of these is probably 2015's Honey Pop, a match 3 puzzle game which has over 24,000 reviews. Obviously, they all played it for the puzzles. This is, of course, a silly moment. Players buying a puzzle game on Steam and then downloading a patch to add the stuff they actually want. It's a clear half measure. And then on September 11th, 2018, Steam approved its first uncensored adult game, Negligee Love Stories. And as they say, the rest is history. In 2018, developers released 161 games onto Steam with the label adult content. In 2019, 440 adult content games. Last year, 1,392. That is how we get to today, when a game like Flipwitch exists. It's well made, it has amazing music, it's available on Steam for anybody to play, assuming that they are of legal age. And it does financially fine. It has over 4,000 reviews, one of which, to wrap things up, I will quote right now. Thought I was going to goon to this game, but I had so much fun trying to 100% it, I was genuinely playing for the gameplay at that point. And that is how sex games blew up, then quite literally blew up, and then blew up, and now are blowing up. I'm realizing after saying that it's a really obvious pun that I should have caught earlier. Anyway, after this break, we have an interview with lewd game creator Hot Pink. What a conversation this was. I cannot wait for you to hear what it is like to make H games in the year 2025, who the audience is, what is on trend, spoilers, not what you think, and so much more. We'll get to that right after the break.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Hot Pink. I also sometimes go by Hatu Pinku or HP, sometimes just Pink if we're close like that. But yeah, I am a game designer. I don't really have an official title, but sometimes it's a game director, sometimes it's more production, sometimes, studio head. Just refer to me as a humble game designer, and that's great with me.
Before we get started, I want to get some terminology right, because I, for the life of me, can't figure it out. Sex games, porn games, lewd games. Is there a term that is preferred?
Yeah, it kind of depends. I think for me, I've always said, we make H games, which sort of harkens back to the Eastern Japanese style where there wasn't this stigma. It's a bit more about the art. We try and strive away from calling ourselves porn games because we don't want to see ourselves as that. We're not working with real-life models or anything like that. Everything we're working on is on the cartoony or cutesy side, or sometimes 3D stuff. But yeah, kind of shy away from, the porn title, just trying to make it not weird. And if you say I work on porn games, that's, there's some stigma there. That can be a little weird, can be off-putting to people. So we want to make it easy for people to get into and not feel weird about.
For sure. That makes so much sense. I mean, something we talked about earlier in this episode is this idea of erotic games shifting to Japan for a large chunk of their history. And you're right. Here, you say porn, and what you think of is the porn industry and not video games really at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you remember kind of the first moment where you realized you wanted to make these sorts of games?
Pretty decently early on in my career, I had this fascination with sex, right? Not really in the sort of way you might be thinking, but more of an academic way, right? Always trying to learn a bit more about the human element and all that, understanding what brings people pleasures and things like that. On the schooling side, I was actually a business major in college, but had been making games on the side. It was sort of my hobby. On the side of that hobby was like, hey, what if these sort of adult games were better than they are? And that's where it started the spark in me of thinking like, hey, what if I bring my skills and my sort of way of thinking into this industry and sort of make, better games for a wider spread of audiences and, kind of meld the two, right?
You're a business student at this time. Do you see an opportunity here, or does knowing how the business works, looking at what is available in the market, does that kind of scare you away from it?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that from the business perspective, it was really interesting because it was a pretty decently sized market for the adult games at the time when I was looking into it. But you could see the quality isn't quite there where it could be, I thought. So yeah, from a business perspective, like, hey, let's get in here. It's a growing market. It's something I'm passionate about as well. So if we can make things better, let's get into it. Let's grow it.
You talk about quality lacking during that period. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you talked about it earlier as well, where like if you do a search on Steam for like, hentai, you come up with thousands and thousands upon results. And, a little bit of that is maybe that there's just a lot of slop on Steam in general right now, but we're also seeing a big wave of that on the adult space. So it's something that has been a plague on this side of the industry, right, is that there's a lot of sort of low effort trying to cash in on the sex side of things because sex sells, right? So why not try and do it? Now you see a lot of AI stuff out there. And the biggest thing is that really the gameplay is not a focus for a lot of these games as well. They're either very simple sort of casual style games, they're sort of very bare bones, cliched writing, visual novels, or some, are just like press the A button a bunch of times and then you get your sexy pictures, which if it sells, you can't knock it too much, but that's not really, where we think they could be in terms of quality standards. So something really tried to strive to better, for the games that we make and help with, and pretty much the whole industry as a whole. If we can get better, everyone else will hopefully get better as well. And
I assume that you see that in the response from the fans, because again, it doesn't take an expert to look at the Steam reviews here. The AI stuff does seem to get shamed relatively often. And if you look at the top sellers in this space, they're pretty high-touch games. I would say more high-touch than a lot of even popular games that are non-H games.
Is high-touch a double entendre there?
Yeah. Well, you said tingling earlier, and I really resisted saying anything. What do you hear from fans about their expectation of quality?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we really try to smash that expectation of quality for what it can be for a lewd game, right? And I think we're doing that. It takes time. It's always been, my philosophy when I'm making my own games, and as well as, with the publisher Critical Bliss, where it's like, hey, if we make games to a really high quality of standard that are also about sex or have sex in them, then people will keep coming back, right? There's some lofty ideas where like, hey, we could be like the Nintendo of lewd games, right? Where it's like, if you're playing a Nintendo game, you're getting a high quality game every time. You're able to bet your money on that. And it helps with the like Steam algorithms and stuff where it's like, okay, if you have just, one game you put out there as a publisher on Steam, some people might get it. But if you keep putting up top quality games time after time, people are going to know what they're going to get is something that's going to be, excellent, going to be worth their money every time. So, we see people coming back from the fans' perspective, right? They're going to come back almost no matter the genre, right? Because they know it's okay, this is going to be a good game. There's also going to be good, sexy stuff in it as well. And be able to just recognize that from the branding of it.
I really love the idea of a Nintendo seal of approval like thing stabilizing this market, considering how much damage the original Nintendo seal of approval did to this market. It seems nice. I'm gonna circle back more about like what makes a game good in this space, because obviously it has some different obligations than a traditional game. But first, for you, what was the first lewd game or H game that you worked on?
Yeah, so there were a few, I would say, failed attempts or experiments. Do we want to go like way back to there, or like a first like official published?
Yeah, let's go way back, because I guess what I'm interested in is there is a stigma, and I don't know if like you felt it. I grew up Catholic in the Midwest, so like the first time you draw a little nude caricature in your school book, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to hell. That's where I'm coming from, right? So I'm curious for you. There is a moment where you decide, hey, I'm gonna make something like this.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about what is that spark?
Yeah, so the first time I ever, I guess, even thought about that, right, was like, I was definitely like a senior in high school, like fresh 18, right, and had got into like ROM hacking. It sometimes was like Pokemon games, but also had gotten real into like the original Metroid. And, you know, as you know, original Metroid, depending on how fast you beat the game, Samus takes off her armor at the end. So, of course, me in my, you know, sort of young adult brain is like, hey, what if I hacked it to where she's like nude at the end if you beat it really quickly? So, you know, in a very basic, you know, sprite editor, like, you know, changed her sprite to look a little naked. Of course, it's like a very small sprite. So you have one little dot for like each nipple and it's like massive. But that was like the very first, I think, inkling where I ever like actually made something. I was like, okay, this could be something. But it was also very kind of a young way of thinking it too. But yeah, I always thought that was my very first foray into it, was way back then when I ROM hacked the original Metroid.
And when does it start to feel like a career or a job or something that you're pursuing, not just, I guess, as like a hobby?
The biggest original hit game I would say I worked on was called Tentacle Locker, to where it's this very cute, lewd game, pretty small, but it's very explicit as well. I remember like, you know, working on it very late one night, trying to like just squash bugs here and there, like very technical stuff, but then like also having to do those technical minutia for the lewd scenes, right? And it gets to a point where it's 2 a.m. and I'm like, oh man, I'm really doing this. I'm really putting like a lot of effort and time into making sure this is really good. But like, you know, do I come back from this? I don't know. But like, you know, it felt it in my heart enough to where it's like, okay, I got to be proud of my work. Anything I put out there, I really want to have that, like you said, seal of approval on it for something that I made. And then even though it was like very small back then and had no dreams of making it as big as we did now, it had that, you know, life flashes before your eyes moment. It was like, okay, we're really doing this now. We're making these games. We're putting them online for people to play and see where it goes. So I'd say that was like the precipice that I had to step over to get where I am now.
Well, okay, so you're in this moment. It's 2 a.m. You're working on a specifically lewd scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always wonder, I assume you've played like the Mortal Kombat games, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
There's somebody who spends a month making it so that somebody's head explodes in just the right way.
Oh, yeah.
And I always wonder, what's their life like? And some people have dug into that. But what is it like to spend dozens of hours working on effectively a sex scene? Does it desensitize at all, or is it like just like anything else?
No, I think it's a great question, and a lot of people bring it up, and it's something I've had to think about very introspectively as well, right? I think those Mortal Kombat developers or anybody who's working on ultra-violence, that's like a very opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're working on something 8 hours a day or more, it's going to affect you one way or another, right? And if it's like a depressing game or like a violent game, like those are hard to shake. That's not something that you have to deal with in everyday life. But the flip side from our perspective is like, you know, sex is a normal thing people do, right?
Yeah.
Most humans get to, you know, experience sex, you know, on a semi-regularly or irregular basis, but like you're having sex more than you're like busting heads open, hopefully. We're engineered to be able to handle these type of emotions a lot better than the depressing emotions or violent emotions, stuff like that. And then to like the desensitized point, I definitely thought about it a lot. It made me, I don't want to use the word desensitize, but I think it really made me appreciate the other emotions that go into sex and love and things like that. I'm not going to be titillated by big-breasted women that are walking down the street, because I get to see that all the time, maybe in a different form. But it's like, okay, I'm not going to be tempted by that. I'm going to seek a partner who I can get really, you know, emotionally invested in, really spend quality time with, and then also be able to, you know, enjoy my sex life as well. So I've never really gotten, you know, tired of it for those reasons, but I guess I've found that sort of finer appreciation to things.
That makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Even preparing to chat with you, I always try to second guess all of my questions. And a thing that I kept running into is people have been drawing the naked form and even erotic art forever.
Oh, yeah.
And spending, if you look at a classical painting, way more time. People can devote years of their life to this thing. And same with violence.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't, sometimes it can be a trick to feel like something is new when it's not new at all. And I guess the more I thought about this, the more I realized that, and makes sense why you would be a perfectly well, that it hasn't ruined your brain or anything like that.
Yeah. Obviously, you worry about people getting like addicted to this kind of stuff. We always try and make our games non-addictive as possible, if that makes sense, right? We want people to play the game, enjoy them, and then hopefully move on to the next game and enjoy that as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's, some people that might, get too deep into this, but as someone who gets to work on it and, like you said, sort of refine those very small details, no, I don't think it's really, affected me in any negative way. I think it's maybe been positive in some of the, relationship aspects as well.
So we talked inward, now looking outward. How do you describe your career to friends and family, if you describe it at all?
Yeah, I keep it pretty secret, to be honest. It's not something that I really shout from the rooftops. Very few people in real life know that I do this full time. They know I get to work on games, but I just can sort of tell them, here's some of the safe work games I've helped with in the past, or say, what I'm working on now is in NDA, can't really talk about it, stuff like that. And usually it ends right there. If you're just talking to people you're meeting casually, they don't dig too much deeper into that. But yeah, I like to keep it mostly buttoned up from a public-facing perspective. Part of that is because of the stigma, right? Don't want people sort of thinking things like that or drawing their own conclusions. But part of it, just personally, I don't want necessarily my work to dictate my personal life as well. So keep it mostly under wraps for that reason as well. But then, when I went to the Game Developers Conference to give my talk this year, couldn't hide it then, so got to talk to a bunch of people about it very, publicly. And that was pretty refreshing, too, because everyone was so open and accepting and really curious about the side of the industry as well. So I was able to form some good connections and talk about it in person, which I don't get to do too often as well.
Tell me a little bit more about that, because there is clearly a lewd game, H game development community. And you can see this one by Critical Bliss, you already mentioned as a publisher, seems to have wrangled quite a bit of this group together. There's a great double series of anthologies on lewd games that I'll make sure to include in our show notes. But it seems like there is a community here. How big it is, that part I'm really struggling to tell, probably because of the anonymity issue. Yeah. So what is the community that I guess that you see?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of different sort of sections to it, right? I would say I started on what was once known as Twitter, back when it wasn't what it is today. I guess it started connecting a lot with the, artists, right? Because I figured that would be a good way to get to know the scene, get to know the community. And I always build myself as a developer who could do like everything but the art. So always knew I needed to have people help me with the art stuff. And got to just have, these really, great interactions with artists that are really pouring their soul out into their crafts and really, upping their game, trying to get better at what they're drawing or expressing, even if it is lewd, sexy content. But it was like, really wholesome. I think that it took me aback a bit. I was like, man, like everyone's like really helping each other out. And I think it's because it's a smaller community, right? Because we have to fight so many other battles in like normal society to get our work accepted. Like everyone else is so supportive. So I'd say the artist community starting out was like always so great. And I always wanted to help lift people up that way. And then, as I grew making more games, got to meet more developers on the developer side. And that lived some on social media. There were, Discords that had pretty big, like a lot of the Western adult game devs together. And I think there was like a lot of people trying to help out. Some people kind of just doing their own thing. But like you said, it's pretty, behind closed doors. A lot of people are just doing what they want to do and not necessarily needing help from other people or wanting to collaborate, things like that, which totally fine, totally get it. If you're making this game on your like very specific kink or fetish, like you probably are the best person to be working on that.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to hire people for that, right? So there's a lot of that as well. Generally, it's, a pretty, welcoming and opening community from that side. I would say one of our goals is to help expand it to where more safe work devs feel more comfortable coming into this side of the industry as a, career path or a curiosity. So got to meet so many people that are either attempting to getting into it or just curious at GDC, because even in mainline games, there's still a lot of romance and sex, even if it's downplayed. But a lot of people want to bring that more to the forefront if they could, if it was up to them. But sometimes they're held back for, a number of reasons. But at least they're curious about it. And I think, we'll continue to hopefully grow personnel and communities and stuff like that.
Do you see this as a safer place to be in the game space?
It would be tough to call it safer. I think this is the business mind rolling right now, right? Where it's like a lot of the problems that are happening in the game space and the tech space right now is a lot of people kind of got over levered or overfunded, especially during the pandemic when they saw some growth and people just like threw money at them, and that money has to get paid back most of the time. So if it doesn't get paid back, people get laid off, right? And it's still happening. But in our space, like we're not able to go out to like a bank or a venture capitalist and be like, hey, give us money for our adult games, because there's not really a structure for that. There's not a place for us to get that kind of funding or support. So a lot of it's been bootstrapped, right? Every dollar that I pay someone else has been money that we've made ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's like a much slower but much more stable growth that we're doing. So like when we want to hire someone, we have to like really look at our books closely and be like, okay, are we able to support this person for hopefully the long term, right? And like pay them a consistent salary. So just that way has forced us to be very cautious to not run out of money. I would say hopefully that in the long term, it could be a safer position for people, but we're not quite that big enough to support a whole industry yet. We're very much a sub-industry and have just been cautious with our cash, but always want to, because there's so much else, I would say, going against us, we want to make sure we are a safe place for people in one way or another. And it's something I even outlined in my GDC talk, where it's like the adult games sub-industry of the game industry is one of the fastest growing. By my very rough calculations, it's 10x in the past 7 or 8 years, pretty much from when I started. So, back then I'd say it was like a $10 million a year market. Now it's well over $100 million a year market with so many different type of adult games out there.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the challenge with capital. Not that anybody can get any investment right now anyway,
right.
But especially here, I can see the issue. I also know making money in general is a challenge, and this is where the porn overlap, I imagine, is tricky. Credit card vendors are notorious for clamping down on porn, just across the internet, and where you can and can't use your credit card. How do lewd game creators make money? Is Steam and itch.io the main option, or Patreon, or what is the path?
Yeah, that's something that it's always a tightrope for us to walk, because we sometimes are at the mercy of payment processors or platforms. We want to get paid for our work, and we want to pay the people that work in the games too, so we have to answer to them. Steam, I would say, has become such a big player in the space that it is what I would say we have to answer to the most. Patreon's also great. itch.io is also great as well. But they all have their different, I would say, intricacies and rules. Itch is great because they'll allow most stuff, and we want to support Itch, so we always give them a cut. But they have a flexible revenue share, right? So you can give them more, you can give them less. So that's always nice. But they don't really have too many restrictions either, which is also nice for us. When you get to Patreon, they have a pretty well laid out terms of service where it's, okay, you can do like adult content, but you can't do anything borderline or fringe or some other sort of scary stuff as well. And it's kind of up to them to decide what that is.
Yeah.
If they see something as non-consensual, for example, but it's not really intended that way, you can argue with them all you want, but they kind of have the final say on it, right? So some people get deplatformed if they go more on the fringe side of things. And then Steam is interesting because they're decently consistent, but like pretty opaque about what it is. We kind of have to learn through example. So we figure out, okay, these Steam games are getting either delisted or not approved. They won't really tell you why, but we can infer like what's going on there. For example, a big thing with Steam is they really care about like the body type and outfits and how that portrays the characters. So if they're like a smaller body type or wear school uniforms, that could be on that fringe of something underage, right? So like anything with a hint of that and any sexual content, nope, you can't do that at all. So they don't really tell you that, but that's what we learned through the platform. So as long as we, quote unquote, follow the rules, of whatever platform we're on, we're generally pretty safe, but we do sort of have to live in that sometimes gray area and tiptoe around some things as well. So it's never like, 100% full creative freedom, but, if we want to get paid, that's what we got to do. So,
Yeah, that's wild. The Steam thing sounds so familiar to me as someone who worked at a large media publication with SEO and Google, where it's like, we have rules, there's a way for you to obey them, and we can't write them down for you. So good luck. Your entire financial model depends on it, and we'll see you on the other side. Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. But I guess it's better than the past. Yeah. So take the ones where you can get them. I'm going to take a quick break here. We'll throw to a commercial, and then we will come right back after this. We're going to talk about the games themselves, because the games are extremely interesting, and I am ready to hear more about them.
Awesome.
Welcome back. We have Hot Pink, or HP, here talking about H games or lewd games, and I want to talk about the games themselves. What is on trend in lewd gaming right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're always trying to chase that. I guess like any other game developer, we're trying to chase trends and figure out what's going to be popular a year from now or 2 years from now, because that's how long it takes to make a game, right? So we're always trying to figure it out. I run off my social media like a kink survey every year. So like I have a big old Google form that people will fill out, like a bunch of kinks if they like from 1 to 5, if they like it or don't like it. So that's always interesting to see like how that changes from year to year. It's also like there's some downsides to it where it's very tailored to my audience. It's not going to encapsulate everything. We don't have everything, every kink under the sun, obviously stuff we don't want to work out. But yeah, the number one winner of the 2025 kink survey was Monster Girls. So we love having this sort of fantastical creatures or girls with monstrous features in our game. So we always have interesting stuff like that we can throw out there. That's the very fantasy side of it. Also sort of more normal everyday stuff. People like goths, people like tomboys, people like wearing glasses while they have really rough sex or something like that. So it's always a gambit. I think there's always like the more fantastical stuff we try and do because, hey, you're not getting that in your other adult content because it either doesn't look good or doesn't make sense. It's really easy to be in a fantasy world and have fantasy monsters doing things, but you really can't have that in real life, right? But then there's also that sort of, I would say, more streamlined, mainline fantasies too, where you want to get with that goth girl that you might have seen somewhere but never actually got to meet. So you can now fulfill that in your fantasy in this game starring some goth girl or something like that, for example.
Who do you see as your target audience?
Yeah, that's also another great question too, because we try and not target any specific audience. I think we want to have like a very wide audience of people that are coming to these games for a number of reasons, right? We want to make something that is novel enough that we can crack the people that haven't played these games before and want to give these games a shot. Anyone and everyone is hopefully our target audience. We never do anything like too kinky or like too fringe, stuff like that, where we try to keep things pretty mainline. A lot of my stuff has been very much on like the cute lewd side, right? So it's kind of, here's art that you may not see represented in traditional adult content or elsewhere. We also try and cater to people that may be like underserved in their lewd content, right? So we try to bring more people sort of in, I would say, that way.
Yeah, I think there are some people who are listening right now who haven't seen any of these games before and are probably picturing a pretty traditional cis-het dude, right, as the audience. And earlier in the show, I played some music from Flipwitch. Did you work on it directly or just through Critical Bliss?
Yeah, on the very end, I got to help with a little bit. So like the last 5%, I got to help some of the polish phase.
So can you describe basically the premise of the game?
Yeah, so Flipwitch is like a platform Metroidvania type game, probably most similar to the Momodora games, if you ever played any of those, where it's pixel art, pretty decently action heavy, platform heavy. But yeah, you play as a character that inherits this power to switch genders on the fly. So you can become a male or female at will. There's some fun combat challenges and puzzles tied to that as well. But then also that ties into the lewd parts of the game as well.
In your GDC speech, you talked about this idea of like where you actually present rewards in games like this. Can you say a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, for sure. So traditionally, it became a stigma, especially in the Japanese side of the developers, where you might get rewards after you fail, for example, right? Like the idea is, oh, you've been conquered by this big monster, now the monster has their way with you. But this can get pretty tricky and sticky fast, right? To where it's like a lot of people don't want that. Or like if they're not very good at the game, they might not, it's not up to them, right? Like they have to have this happen to them just because they missed a jump or missed their dodge on the enemy, for example. So we've done that a bit, and there's some in Flipwitch as well, but we try to do things where we flip that on our head and give you that reward for either going out of your way to find a secret, or maybe once you beat the enemies, then you get your chance to have the reward as a lewd scene then. But we never want to force the player into something that they're not comfortable with, or that maybe they've seen 1,000 times, or force the player to game over, essentially, to get all the lewd rewards. Because if the idea of the lewd game is to get those lewd rewards, you don't want players like have to fail to get that either. So we always try to get around that. I
guess, speaking of tricky, sticky situations, how do you pace a game like this? Because there are two goals happening, right? There's playing the game and there's like playing yourself. And I assume you are thinking about that there is the hands-off controller time, but cooked into this.
Yeah, no, exactly. And a lot of people ask that, GDC too, right? I think that the pacing question is also really interesting too, because I think like any kind of good action movie example, right? You want to start with a big action scene. There's a big high energy, something like that. Sometimes we want to shy away from that, right? We want the player to have a bit of a build up, get used to the actual gameplay sides of things, and then they have the big reward, the big climax, all the dopamine that goes into their brain through the lewd reward, for example. But then also we want to have those gameplay phases be pretty separated as well, so we don't have to worry about one-handed controls, as people talk about sometimes, where it's okay, like you're playing the game and then you're playing the sex or whatever, right? To where there's like two different sides of it. You're either platforming or you're doing some sex minigame or something like that, where there are two different phases of the game, so you can sort of have different moments here to here.
Yeah. I want to go back to the trends, because we talked about, obviously, like the kinks and Monster Girls. What about the gameplay itself? What sort of genre lends itself to this?
Yeah, we think it can be pretty much anything, right? Like we've experimented with a number of different, I would say, genres. Obviously, there's a lot of background in the sort of visual novel space where people are telling stories and looping sex into that somehow. So we figured that's like kind of been done before. So we try to, I would say, strive away from that, and have done a lot of more traditional, I guess, sort of gameplay scenarios or genres where we've got side-scrolling beat-em-ups, quest-a-thons, platformers, Metroidvanias, shoot-em-ups. They're more traditional style games, but we either inject the sex into them or make them about sex in some kind of way, while also having some ideas that are a bit more, lean into the sex from the start, right? I think Orc Massage is a good example, where it's like there's not many like traditional games about giving massages to monster ladies. It pretty easily lends itself to ramping it up into the sex there as well. So yeah, we always try and see what can fit. And I think, like, for me, from the game design perspective, that's always an interesting challenge to figure out, like, okay, how could we meld these two genres together and sort of make it make sense in an adult lewd perspective. A good example of one I'm working on right now is like, we're trying to make a stealth action-y game like Metal Gear Solid, but it's also going to be like an exhibitionist game, right? So obviously the stealth makes sense when you're like not trying to get caught, but what if sometimes you want to get caught in certain situations to make sexy stuff happen? So sometimes it flips it on the head when we are trying to bring a traditional genre into this type of thing. But yeah, we're always trying new stuff and experimenting and seeing what works. And it's always fun for me to figure that out as well.
You mentioned Orc Massage, and I just love blunt titles in this space. Video games have a long history of blunt titles. They are not limited to here. But there's something so much better about a blunt title here. Flipwitch it's leaning towards it. Orc Massage, you're like right there. And then I'm looking at the Critical Bliss catalog. Fuda, Fix, Dick, Dine, and Dash is just, everything you need to know if that game is for you. And then if you heard that and you were like, what's going on? Probably not your game. And that's okay. You can play Midnight Castle Succubus DX and be totally okay. To wrap things up, let's say someone is listening to this show and they're curious. They're like, hey, never thought about playing these games. Maybe I want to try. But I feel a little silly about it, or I feel intimidated, right? Or I just don't know where to start. What do you recommend they do?
Yeah, I think there's two options there. You can jump right in. Steam's a great place for bigger games. We've already mentioned it, right, where Flipwitch is a great sort of entry point into the subgenre of lewd games, right? Because, not only is it a great platform Metroidvania, but also has some great sexy scenes as well. Similar also to Aurelia, which is more like a old school adventure game. So if you're not into action platforming, you can sort of take it slow with that. There's this gorgeous pixel art. You're able to take the story at your own pace. And those are both like big, chunky games, right? So you can really dive right into it. If you're maybe a little more skeptical, come on to itch.io. Just search the tags for, adult or hentai or whatever you're into, and make sure your search filters are okay. And then, just kind of find something short or free. Obviously, I think I have a bunch of great options on the Hot Pink itch page. There's a bunch of other great developers out there as well that have stuff you can try out. But so you can give it a try or just dive right in. I would say either way is great.
Great. Thank you so much for making the time to chat. This has been like a real treat and a real pleasure.
Yeah, I love talking about it. I love being able to spread the word, spread the gospel of what we're trying to do here. Hopefully destigmatizing it a bit and just getting, more people into it, more people making these, weird, cool, lewd games, and sharing the art of it.
Hey, I see people leaving reviews on their public Steam handles. The tide is turning slowly but surely.
Oh, yeah.
I'm ready for it. Hopefully we'll have you back in 10 years, and then it'll be $1 billion industry. You'll be swimming in gold coins. It'll be wonderful. Welcome to Act 3, the news of the week. First up, we've got Paris Mon Amour. That's right, it's Parry Talk. The independently funded and collectively owned video game site Aftermath made the case for and against parrying in video games. Of course, both essays make valid arguments for and against the combat trend of 2025. Unfortunately, video game discourse was determined either to find a winner or, and perhaps more importantly, humiliate a loser. Is this news? No, of course it's not. You can parry or not parry. You can like whatever games or dislike whatever games you want. But am I so jealous of Aftermath? Yeah, like big time. After a little more than a year of existence, they could inspire days of rage over a trivial video game mechanic like we are reliving Twitter circa 2015. I am not an editor-in-chief anymore, but I can't turn that part of my brain off, and the envy is real. The only way that I can make up for these feelings of guilt and shame is to tell you to go read aftermath.site. Next up, Elden Ring Night Rain Cloud. I'm trying. Elden Ring Night Rain launched to, by the standards of its franchise, mixed positive reviews. I thought that the crew at Triple Click did a really nice job of explaining the many things about the game that need to come together for the optimal experience. Here's a clip.
You can also spar a little bit in this little training area, but you can't really learn a character class until you take him or her on a run. And if you go on a run, it's like a waste of everyone's time if you're just trying to learn things and you're not like actively trying to beat it. And so it's really hard to learn things because like if you're playing with strangers, they might start barreling ahead and you're just like trying to keep up with them and you don't actually learn what you're doing along the way. You're just kind of following them. Whereas if you slow down, either the timer will kill you because the flame circles will get you before you even have much of a chance to explore or like experiment, or like you just won't be able to do it fast enough. It's a very frustrating experience because it feels very poorly paced because of that timer.
Over at VG247, Connor Maker wrote a compelling 5-star case for the game's excellence. Connor, I hope that I got that name right, if you're listening. Here's a graph that really stood out from that review. Elden Ring Night Rain is about taking down a big, scary night fella, sure. But more than that, it's about people from different walks of life coming together to overcome great odds. This is a narrative through line that weaves between story and gameplay alike. It's a meta-narrative. The characters are coming together, growing fond of each other, and growing individually as comrades in arms, yes, but so are you. You and the random people you match up with on your journey. That random dad who ran off on his own and died twice in the fire. The French guy who clutched out the Night Lord and somehow revived the whole team. The connection between the Guardian and his newfound flock is a mirror to the bonds you build with the online randos you'll no doubt matchmake with. It's good stuff. In a last bit of news, Game Informer, remember them? They returned a few weeks ago and have slowly been digging themselves out of the ground following a premature burial by former owner GameStop. This is why you put those little bells on the graves like they did in the olden days, so people aren't just scratching at the roof of the coffin. If you sign up to the site for the low price of free, you can access the entire back catalog of Game Informer issues dating back to 1991. Now, as PC Gamer noted in their write-up of this news, half the reason to flip through the virtual pages is the gleefully trashy ads from the 1990s. As always, you can find links on Patreon and Substack to everything that we spoke about. Y'all, we did it. That is episode 2 in the books. It is worth noting this episode focused on porn, sexy, and lewd games that exist largely to titillate, but there's an entire corner of sexual video games with a greater interest on ideas. Often still sexy and horny, but more artful in the traditional sense of the word artful. These are the works of Anna Anthropy, Robert Yang, and many, many other developers. There's also the world of romance games, where developers create NPCs for you to, on a pretty broad spectrum of what this could mean, fall in love with. Now, I hope to talk about both of those corners of gaming in the future, and if that's something that you would be interested in, let me know. But for now, it is time to say farewell. For Patreon subs, one last bonus. We shall say farewell with a short reading from the official Brady Strategy Guide to Cybersex. For everyone else, thank you so much for listening. You can subscribe to the newsletter at post.games. You can subscribe to the show, which is a huge help, at patreon.com/postgames. The show is now available on all podcast platforms of your choice. If you like it, share it with a friend, or, and this does a lot for the show, especially early on, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And that's it. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week.